Well, I just finished watching Dr. Sleep the movie, and I do really mean just finished. I started writing the script as the credits were rolling. So that should say how strong my feelings are for this movie. They're not good feelings. They're strong, but not good. Something I want to get out of the way first is that I don't hate movie adaptations that don't follow the source material to a T. In fact, I kind of love it. A good example of it was actually The Shining, where Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining, both of which were novels originally written by Stephen King. I don't know, I have dyslexia, which, for those of you wondering, I have read both of. Teehee. In 1980, Stanley Kubrick adapted The Shining for the big screen, and it was a hit. So much so that his adaptation outshines the original. There are few who don't know that Stanley Kubrick's film was originally a book, but there are fewer who have actually read said book, and, well, I know this because every time I mention both the movie and the book, I talk about the stark differences between them, and I am always met with something along the lines of, what changes? Which, hi, to those of you here who haven't watched and read The Shining. Yeah, it's actually a lot. Probably the biggest change comes from Dick Harlan's character. Spoilers for a book that came out in 1977. Dick saves Danny and his mother from the hotel before it explodes. Also, the hotel explodes. In the movie, we're shown that Dick and Danny both have what Dick's grandmother calls the shining, and their initial connection is born. Now, what doesn't happen is Danny consistently calling out to Dick using his shine in more than just the final act. In the novel, we mainly follow Danny instead of his father. It's a lot more clear in the novel, but the ghosts of the Overlook Hotel don't want Jack Torrance. They want his son Danny, because Danny's shine is stronger than most people's, and the Overlook Hotel can use his shine to get stronger. The only reason they even take Jack is because he's weaker mentally, and they plan to use him to eventually get to Danny. I already told you that I like the movie adaptation despite its changes, but I never mentioned why. I promise all of this has to do with why I think Dr. Sleep is a bad movie. Please bear with me. The Shining makes its changes matter. As I said, in the novel, there's a lot more focus on Danny, but there isn't any less of Jack. Instead of splitting our screen time between Jack and Danny, we spend more time with Jack developing his character and remove Danny's development, which unfortunately does mean we lose Dick, because Dick is there as Danny's support/mentor. So without Danny, we don't need Dick. I need Dick. That's besides the point. In the adaptation, Jack is a lot more reliable, which isn't really saying much. In the novel, Jack's drinking problem is front and center. Jack's drinking isn't played as something he's overcome and is pulled back into like it is in the movie. Jack had to stop drinking because his life was falling apart. When he goes in for the interview with the head of the Overlook Hotel, Mr. Ullman makes it very clear to Jack that if it wasn't for the recommendation from Jack's work colleague that he is very close with, he would not have even considered him for the position. Mr. Ullman essentially calls Jack a drunk and a loser and tells Jack that he has very little faith in him being able to take care of the hotel, which makes Jack very angry. Despite Mr. Ullman being, well, a prick, he is correct about Jack. The reason Jack needs the caretaker job is because he was fired from his teaching position for, well, beating the shit out of a 15-year-old. And this isn't the first time that Jack's hurt someone either. He broke Danny's arm when Danny was 3 because he destroyed one of his screenplays. And there was an incident where Jack and a fellow professor were driving drunk and they hit a child at night, assuming they killed them, but never found the body and then never reported it. None of which is ever mentioned in the movie, so we can assume it didn't happen, except Danny's arm, but that's mostly brushed off and treated as an accident and less like the first of many times where Jack's lost control of his anger. Jack is a shit father, and a shit person in general. He's self-centered, a narcissist, and he cheated on his wife with a student, i.e. someone he had full control over, which, you know, is a very bad relationship. Jack sucks. A lot. In response, you could say that we don't learn any of this because it's Jack's perspective, and he wouldn't want us to know any of the bad stuff he does. But I fully believe that when it comes to media, if you don't state it, it's not real. If you don't put in any mention or reference to an event or personality trait, then it's not part of said media. You can't go back and say, Well, actually, this character was gay the entire time, and I didn't mention anything or put in any reference to him being gay. And now that we have a story that is going to be coming out, and we're going to be making a bunch of movies about it that actually focus around his character and the other character that he was supposed to be in a romantic relationship with, we're not going to actually do any of the gay stuff that I mentioned, because I essentially just did that so that I could gain brownie points, because I hate trans people. I'm gonna have to censor that. Fuck you, J.K. Rowling. You're a shit writer. Teehee. So with that being said, very little of Jack's behavioral issues were mentioned, so we can believe that it was an intentional decision by the director to not use any of said material because it did not fit into what he believed was necessary in telling his version of The Shining. I know this is about Dr. Sleep. I'll get to it. Just listen. To talk about Dr. Sleep, we first need to talk about what The Shining did right, so we can understand what Dr. Sleep did wrong and why it's a bad movie. The Shining is, yes, an adaptation of a book, but Stanley Kubrick made it something more. He still followed the main points of the book, i.e. what The Shining is, who are the characters, what's the setting, so on, blah, blah, blah. But took all of it and built it into a newish story. A story that no longer follows Danny, and instead focuses on his father. So, when you adapt the second novel of a book series, when the first has already been made into a movie by someone else, you need to take that into consideration. Which is why I hate Dr. Sleep. We can look at the final trailer of the movie first, actually. When it comes to marketing, you want to build hype. Keep the potential audience interested. You want to pick parts that will draw the most people in, saving the most impactful for last. They didn't show Danny sitting down eating a bowl of cereal for 2 minutes straight, then go, hey, watch this on Netflix, lol. They showed him walking into the Overlook Hotel. He's cautious, but he has a reason to be here. He can't leave despite his fears. He looks over the door he rode on as a child, through the hole his father made as he tried to kill his mother, down the hall where he saw the first apparitions of the Overlook Hotel, the twins who died because the hotel took over their father, just like his, and were killed for their shine, the same shine he has. There's many more references to Stanley Kubrick's adaptation with the way Rose, don't worry about her, stands in The Hedgemaids, young Danny on his trike, and the elevator scene. What I'm saying is they intended for you to watch the trailer and think it was a linear sequel to The Shining, the movie. Which isn't a bad thing. To continue, in my opinion, one of the best movies years later, that's fucking great, I'd love that. But it doesn't. Dr. Sleep, the movie, follows the book. As I spent a long time talking about The Shining, the movie, that doesn't follow the book. The movie doesn't even put enough of the book in the movie that I do like for the ending scene of said movie to even make sense unless you have read the book. He's in the picture frame from the past because he died in the hedge maze. And when you die in the Overlook Hotel, you become one of its staff in the afterlife, which is why he's in the picture. It's not a mystery. The groundskeeper, the lady in room 237, the people at the party on the 4th of July, which I thought was New Year's. Like, do Americans really celebrate 4th of July? Like, I thought that was kind of like a joke. Like, what the fuck? The old groundskeeper and his kids, they all died in the Overlook, and now they are part of its staff. That's why he's there. Point is to heavily reference the original movie and instead base your movie off of the material that the movie you made many cinematic references to proceeded to only use as a rough outline. It fucking sucks. I will admit that Dr. Sleep did a good job of introducing our main villain, Rose, and her group. She's being genuinely kind to a small child, and yet there's an underlying tension throughout the scene. It sets her up as someone who is in control of everything. Which she is, and it's not something that I want to dig into right now because that's not what this is about, and it'll probably take me like 10 minutes, and I just don't want to right now. Then, we're introduced to Danny again. Soon after, he'd escaped from the Overlook Hotel with his mother, who was still haunted by the things he witnessed. Again, very good. It's setting up Danny's character, like how is he going to face these troubles? What is going to happen with him? It's a very good starting point. Then Danny talks with Dick, you know, the guy that Mr. Stanley Kubrick man over here essentially removed from the story because the main focus wasn't Danny and he wasn't needed. Dick essentially took over the role as Danny's father and mentor. In the book, he saved both Danny and his mother from the Overlook. There's many little obstacles he has to overcome before even making it to Colorado, let alone the hotel. When he makes it to the town closest to the hotel, he gets a snowmobile and drives it through the blizzard that's happening. The wind is splitting his knuckles and ice is flying in his face. Yet he continues because he knows that he's the only one that can save Danny and his mother. Even when he's faced with the hedge animals, he fights them so he can save Danny. And his mom. MILF. There are hedge animals in the garden that Dick had seen move before, and from that point on, he was terrified of them. It's written a lot better than how I just described it now, I promise. Like, trust me. We didn't see any of that at all. So when Danny talks with Dick on the bench, it doesn't mean anything to us. When Dick talks about the abuse he faced as a child, we don't have the emotional connection to him because we never got to connect with him at all. We didn't watch him risk his life to save these people he grew to care for because of the gift that they shared. We didn't see him as a strong mentor willing to risk his life. So when we hear him talk about the abuse, it leaves very little. Instead of learning our hero was hurt, but has persevered anyway. We just learned that a random dude from the first movie had a really bad grandfather. All of Dr. Sleep so far has played out pretty much like the book did, except Rose's part, but whatever. The problem with that being, for the audience to get the full emotional impact of the scenes from the book, they would have to go and read the book. The book that the movie they continuously made reference to in the trailer diverged from. They would have to read the original Shining. This talk between Danny and Dick again played out the same in the book, and in the book there was a lot of setup between them. We didn't get any of this buildup, and Dr. Sleep just pretends as if there was that buildup in the first movie. It's almost like they made this movie as if The Shining, the movie, followed the book to a T. That's where my problems lie. It's a sequel to an adaptation that was never made. Now spoilers for a book that came out in 2013. After he's able to seal away the woman in room 237, Danny grows up and turns to drugs and alcohol to dull his shine so he's able to ignore all of the apparitions seeking him out. He becomes dependent on them for years and ends up homeless, as well as many other misfortunate things happening to him and to the people around him. He's only ever able to kick his addiction with the help of his AA sponsor, whose name I can't find anywhere and I don't want to spend the next couple hours reading the book to find, and Billy, who drives a small train. Now the clear of mind and sober Danny gets a job as a hospice as a nurse and helps comfort the dying patients. One night, as an older patient is dying, he's met with a parade of the dead. And one of the men walking is Dick. It takes Danny a second to realize the implications of this. Dick is dead. The man who risked his life to save him died, and he didn't even know. To those of you who remember the movie very well, that may sound a little strange to you. Because in the first movie, Dick dies. Jack hits him with an axe and he fucking dies. So now, this big realization for Danny just doesn't happen. Instead, he sees Dick and is like, oh my god, bestie, it's been years. What have you been up to? You remember that whole, dead thing that happened to you? Crazy. My dad was just really weird that day. Yeah, no worries. You can definitely come over next weekend and he'll probably be okay. In the book, Wendy calls on Dick, again, who never died, to talk to Danny as a child because she knows that if he can't open up to her, he will open up to Dick. She can trust him. Not only is there this bond between Dick and Danny, there's one between Wendy and him too, which can't happen at all, because he died. Oh, in case it wasn't clear, the only black guy doesn't die in the book. This movie tried so hard to point at the first movie and go, look, this is us, yay, and then go over to the book and do the same thing. Doing so ignores what the movie did to differentiate itself and also ignores everything the book built up. You can't have a meaningful moment between Danny and Dick when we barely saw the extent of their bond. And because the writers and directors wanted to follow the book so bad, they didn't show us that because it didn't happen in Dr. Sleep. That all happened in The Shining. That all happened and was not adapted. They could have easily added in a couple scenes here and there where Danny is scared, so he calls to Dick. Wendy might even find Danny in a catatonic state and wish to herself that Dick was here to use his shine to talk to him. They could have done a lot more, and they just didn't. They didn't need to bring Dick back to life to do any of this either. Fuck, man, you could even say that Danny didn't know that Dick died in the hotel. Maybe Wendy told him he wasn't able to make it to the hotel and couldn't come see him in person anymore. Then when Danny sees him again among the crowd of the dead, he breaks down, realizing that he didn't make it. When you make a sequel, you must follow the original story of the previous one, even if you really want to follow the source material. Danny wasn't the main character. You can't just pretend that he was and got all this character development that never happened. It just doesn't work like that. But it did happen because all that happened in the book, so blah, blah, blah. You read the book. Why are you complaining? Because it's bad storytelling, and it just didn't need to be. The Shining, the movie, did not follow the book. Dr. Sleep, the movie, could have easily added in all of these things that did not happen to make certain things be more impactful. One of the most famous scenes from The Shining, actually a lot of the famous scenes from The Shining, did not happen in the book. Stanley Kubrick added those in to make it a more impactful story, to make it fit more with Jack being the main character. When Wendy finds Jack's writing and reads through it and looks and sees that there's just pages upon pages upon pages of Jack writing down, all work and no play makes Jack a very dull boy. That adds to Jack's character. There had been many points before then where Jack's sanity had been questioned, but that is essentially the breaking point for you where you go, ah, shit, dude. He's kind of fucked now, ain't he? Dr. Sleep could have added in scenes like that to fully flesh out Danny's character. They just didn't. All of his development happened in the first book that was not adapted. And they didn't bother to put any of it in. Burp.